Okay, we're live, everybody. How's it going? It is, what, Tuesday, April 30th. Oh, my goodness. One more day. I got to pay rent tomorrow. All right, your Ben Joravsky show is just moments away. Let me turn on the video here. All right. Hey, how's it going, everybody? But before we get going into your Ben Joravsky show, remember, the Ben Joravsky show is brought to you by unions. Quite a few of them, in fact, like the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Thank you to those unions for jumping on board and bringing the Ben Joravsky show back. And today's Ben Joravsky show is brought to you by our friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky show starts now. It is Tuesday, April 30th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, our Chicago Reader colleague Maya Dukmasova will join us. We welcome Green Party voter and firefighter Sam Holloway, and its political talk host, Doris Davenport. Now your host, maybe a Green Party voter, definitely not a firefighter, and a political talk host, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this It's Maya's Fault Tuesday, and here's why. Great weekend. You have a good weekend, D?
Yeah, 2 days ago. It was fantastic. We're in the middle of the week, Ben.
Oh, yeah, my weekend. Yeah, it just lingers with me, the greatness of it all. Watched a movie, The Wood, came out in 1999. Finally got around to seeing it. Good movie, by the way.
We got to get a Monday show so you can talk about these weekends properly.
Oh, let's see what else.
Wait, The Wood? That's an old movie. I remember that movie.
Yeah, I told you, 1999. I finally got around to watch. You know what? I may have seen it in 1999. It did look vaguely familiar. Anyway,
it's about marriage.
Oh, yes, that's correct. It's also about friends. There's these three friends, and one's getting married, and he has reluctance, and the other two drag him back to his wedding, and while they're dragging him back, they reflect on their life together. Good flick. I recommend it to absolutely everybody. Whoops, dropped my pen there. Let's see, what else? Oh, saw several episodes of Trailer Park Boys, all right?
All right. You watched the show? Or just the clips on YouTube?
Just the clips on YouTube.
Okay.
I still haven't seen a show. I read a great novel, American Spy. Wonderful book. I urge everybody to read. It's sort of like Ralph Ellison meets John Le Carrier. And then, folks, woke up.
Smart guy.
Woke up and got back to reality, D. Oh, yeah. Woke up to read the latest Republican call to arms. It came in the form of an essay in Sunday's New York Times by a woman named Helen Andrews. She's the managing editor of the Washington Examiner magazine, which apparently is a right-of-center magazine. Anyway, follow me on this, folks. The central point of this essay is that women are responsible for social inequity. All right, let me back up a little bit. Social inequity is a big problem in this country today. The gap between the richest of the rich and the rest of us is growing wider day by day. It's growing wider in part thanks to Republican policies like, just to pick one, last year's tax break for the rich passed by Trump and his Republican yes-men and congressmen. So what do we do to eradicate social inequity and make things more fair, more equal? Well, even Republicans realize they got to do something, or else they might lose next year's election. But what to do? They don't want to do the obvious thing, which would be to take back the tax hike, because the reason they put the tax hike, take back the tax cut, because the reason they put the tax cut in the first place is to help the richest of the rich. So they need to come up with a new culprit to blame social inequity on. I know. We're going to blame it on Maya. Maya Dukmasova, our next guest. It was Maya's fault.
I knew it the whole time.
You know that Maya knew she was up to no good. Well, not just Maya, but Maya and all working women, like, our 2:30 guest, Doris Davenport. It's her fault, too. I'm going to ask Doris Davenport what she thinks about that, and I'll ask Maya about what that. Anyway. All right, so here's the situation, folks. This is the world according to Andrews, Helen Andrews, who wrote this column that ran in the New York Times, which is essentially the call to arm for Republicans. All right, so the problem is that there are too many women working in the workforce. All right, you following this? This is not me saying. I'm just paraphrasing.
Like my uncle wrote this article. Hey, Uncle Eldon.
I think Uncle Eldon may have written this article. All right, here we go. So with so many women in the workplace, salaries go down. All right. So if we could just get the women out of the workplace, and again, this is not me speaking, I'm paraphrasing the argument raised by Republican strategist Helen Andrews, Republican philosopher Helen Andrews. Anyway, if you could just get the women out of the workplace, salaries would go up. That means men would make more money, and women could go back to doing, what they do best, which is, taking care of the families and being housewives. Hey, don't blame me. Don't send your letters, your email. I'm just reporting what Helen Andrews wrote, all right? So there you go. So if...
too late. You got an email here. It's Ben Joravsky. How dare you?
Sorry, man. It wasn't me. I didn't write the story. Again, it was Helen Andrews. I'm just reporting it. So what she says effectively is that the Republicans have to come with some kind of plan that subsidizes women to go back to working, just working at home, being housewives, etc., so that men could be the only people in the workforce. Salaries would rise because there'd be fewer people in the workforce, and families would be saved. Because essentially the reason why there's drug use and teen pregnancies and crime is because women aren't at home raising the kids. You got that, D? All right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the situation. You got that, everyone? I'll tell you, you just got to get women out of the workplace, get them back in the homes, and life will be good. I'm telling you, man, those Republicans will try to sell you any old thing to avoid raising taxes on the rich. We got a great show today. Maya Tukmasova will be here. That's correct. Maya from The Reader will be here at 1:30, and I'll ask her about this article, among other things, to see what she thinks about it, because it's what she thinks about being the culprit for social inequity. Sam Holloway, Green Party vote. Every time I bring Sam on, he'd come on the old show. Every time I bring him, people would be outraged because Sam is what we would say to the left of left. And I think it's important for liberals and just general progressives to hear what he has to say, if for no other reason, to destroy once and for all the notion that the Democratic Party somehow or other can't win elections because they can't get guys like Sam to vote for their candidates. Because there's no way, guys, Green Party people like Sam would vote for the normal, regular Democrats. All right, so it's good just to listen to what he has to say just from that perspective alone. And then, of course, at 2:30, Doris Davenport will be here. Love talking politics with Doris Davenport, old friend of the show back in the old days when we were back at that radio station, whatever it's called. So we'll have Doris talk.
That one you got fired from.
Yeah, that one.
Okay,
yeah.
let's make it sure.
Yeah, no, that different. That was the one. Yeah, I had to think about it. So great guest, Doris Davenport. Look forward to talking politics with her. Politics all day long. But before we do any of that, Dr. D with the news.
Hey, guys. The D stands for Dennis. It's the middle of the day. Let's talk about the national news happening this afternoon. Hey, here's nothing new at all. Another person is leaving the Donald Trump White House. A few weeks there till that happened last time. This time it's the Deputy Attorney General, and we knew this was going to happen. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, a.k.a. the guy who appointed Special Counsel Robert Mueller to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Yeah, Rosenstein submitted his resignation letter to the White House on Monday. Here's a quote in the resignation letter from Rod Rosenstein, who will officially be uninvited to the White House cheeseburger night starting May 11th. He's leaving May 11th. Quote, "We enforce the law without fear or favor because credible evidence is not partisan and truth is not determined by opinion polls. We ignore fleeting distractions and focus our attention on the things that matter because a republic that endures is not governed by the news cycle."
All right, very good. I'm going to give him credit, Rosenstein credit for this. He didn't bow to pressure and do what Trump told him and to, fire Mueller. And so, yeah, you know what? That he didn't do it. Robert Bork did, if we go way back into Watergate days, and just follow the president's orders. So I give him credit for that. But, D, I don't know. There's an article in Tribune that had more of the resignation letter. Do you quote the rest of the resignation letter there?
Yeah, let's get that part.
All right, well, this part here, you note that he won't be invited to the cheeseburger party. But here's the part of the resignation letter that may get his invitation back. And I'm reading this from the Tribune. This is, quote, in his resignation letter to Trump, Rosenstein praised the president. Quote, as I submit my resignation effective on May 11th, I am grateful to you for the opportunity to serve, for the courtesy and humor you often display in our... Sorry. The courtesy and humor you often display in our personal conversations, and for the goals you set in your inaugural address, patriotism, unity, safety, education, and prosperity, because a nation exists to serve its citizens. Maya Dukmasova has entered the building. Maya has entered the building. Can't wait to ask her what she has to say about it being her fault for social inequity in the United States. Anyway, Rosenstein, here's my favorite part. I am grateful to you for the opportunity to serve, for the courtesy and humor you often display in personal. You would never think courtesy was anything that anybody would accuse Donald Trump of. Well, he is pretty funny when he does his windmill imitation. You know what I'm saying? That maybe Rosenstein loves that windmill. Anyway, I'll tell you what, it's funny. They're still sucking up to Donald Trump. Can't even leave without your courtesy and humor. I guess he does want to get invited to that hamburger party.
Must be good burgers. All right, another Trump news. Oh, President Donald Trump, 3 of his children, Donald Jr., Eric and Ivanka, and his business are suing 2 banks to block them from turning over financial records to congressional committees that have issued subpoenas for the information. It's the second attempt in court that Trump has made this month to end the Democratic-led House of Representatives from investigating his financial history. The legal action is against Deutsche Bank, one of Trump's lenders, and Capital One. What's in your wallet? Those commercials. Love those commercials.
Yeah. Didn't Charles Barkley do the commercial for them?
I don't know. Probably not. Trump's attorney recently said that both banks have, quote, long provided business and personal banking services to plaintiffs.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. This is going to be a fascinating case. And by the way, Jim Coogan has already weighed in, and we're going to bring him on next week to talk about it. I know Monroe is going to want to talk about this tomorrow as well. Monroe has long contended that Deutsche Bank is sort of where Trump launders his money. And then there is a legitimate reason for the Democrats to go after this information to see what the president is up to, what connections he has to Russia, what potential blackmailing points Putin has over Trump, et cetera, et cetera. That is Monroe Anderson's view of the world. Donald Trump's view of the world is that this is an egregious violation of his rights as a private citizen, overreach by the Democrats, and they're on a fishing expedition or a witch hunt, whatever the phrase is of the day, and they're going to fight like hell to resist those subpoenas. I don't know. I look forward to this one playing out. I don't feel sorry for Donald Trump on any level, and some of the reporting about how the Deutsche Bank was so loose and easy with their oversight in terms of the loans they gave Donald Trump, including the loans to build the tower here, right here, which we always go by on the Brown Line every day, Trump Tower. And Dennis and I are heading home. We see that big, beautiful sign.
And I always go, take a look at my building.
That's right. That sign annoys me to this day. $50,000 campaign contribution to Rahm Emanuel. And he got a sign. Hey, Congressman, investigate that. The $50,000 he gave to Rahm. Now how he got the sign. Anyway, in general, when it comes to Donald Trump, I welcome more investigations.
Shout out to the live stream chat. Derek, Kyle, Shia, I'm my sister's keeper. How's it going, guys?
Okay.
That's a long name together. All right. And yeah, we got to talk about Grandpa Joe, former vice president, and now, finally, a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. As weeks seem to be going pretty well so far. Biden officially kicked off his presidential campaign at a rally in Pittsburgh. It took place at the Teamsters Local 249 Banquet Hall, and it was sponsored by the International Association of Firefighters. Make no mistake, unions like Joe Biden. Joe Biden is from Pennsylvania. He's a Scranton man. We've now learned that Biden's campaign headquarters will be in Philadelphia. And according to Grandpa Joe, if he is going to be able to beat Donald Trump in 2020, it's going to happen in Pennsylvania.
I believe that Pittsburgh and my native town of Scranton and my hometown of Wilmington and Claymont, they represent the cities and towns that make up hardworking middle-class Americans who are the backbone of this nation. That's not hyperbole, the backbone of this nation. I also came here because, quite frankly, folks, if I'm going to be able to beat Donald Trump in 2020, it's going to happen here. It's going to happen here.
Guy, is that the same guy from the ROM tape? Yeah, there's always the one guy.
He's a traveler.
I can't wait to ask Maya what she thinks about Joe Biden's president. I know she's got some opinions about this. She's already shaking her head. Get Sam Holloway's thoughts on that as well. And Doris Davenport as well. Joe Biden, everybody has an opinion about Grandpa Joe, and I'm going to hold back with mine as I listen to Maya, Sam, and Doris.
All right, what a tease that was, guys. So, hey, be listening later on for Ben's opinion on that. Here's more from 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden in Pittsburgh.
There are three basic reasons why I'm running for president of the United States.
All right.
The first is to restore the soul of the nation, and the second is to rebuild the backbone of this nation. And the third is to unify this nation. We always do better when we act as one America. Today I want to speak about the second of these three, and that's rebuilding the backbone of America. And that is that we have time, all my time in public life, from since I've gotten involved, I've been referred to as middle-class Joe. It's not always meant as a compliment. It's usually that I'm not sophisticated. That's why I'm middle-class Joe. But the fact of the matter is, I'm awfully sophisticated about why, how, and who built this country. Let me say this simply and clearly, and I mean this. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. It was built by you. It was built by the great American middle class.
Well, they're fired up,
I'm
buddy.
fired up, too. Grandpa Joe. I don't call you middle class Joe. I call you Grandpa Joe.
Yeah, worse.
There's nothing wrong with being Grandpa Joe. No, he's getting ready. That's his spiel. That's his appeal. He's going to push that button. We'll see how if it works. We got focus groups set up. We got Maya, we got Sam, we got Doris. We're going to see if it is working with them. I know Maya's a huge Joe Biden fan. All right.
A new poll conducted by SSRS after Biden's announcement on Thursday shows 39% of voters who are Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents are saying that Joe Biden is their top choice for the nomination. That puts Biden more than 20 points ahead of Mr. $27 himself, Senator Bernie Sanders, who holds 15% in the poll, and roughly 30 points ahead of the next strongest candidate, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, 8%. By the way, fourth place, Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete.
Oh, he's down to fourth place. How much? What's he at?
I don't have it.
Okay, yeah. I of the three that you mentioned, the one that I like the most at the moment is Elizabeth Warren, because she makes the same pitch to sort of middle-class America, working-class America, poor people in general, who have been hammered hard by the policies of Trump and the Republicans. And she has, a slew of policy statements and position papers. She's thought things through. She's actually put together all kinds of constructive ideas down through her career. But she's, how down is she in the polls? 8%? So apparently, once again, D, I am not in the majority, even in the Democratic Party. I just think that there's got to be some kind of bias against people who are smart when it comes to politics in America these days. Elizabeth Warren is clearly smart, and there seems to be a bias against her because she's... I'm going to ask Maya about that. Hold on. Bias against smart people. Ask Maya. All right, good.
Ready? All right, great. So after that announcement, Trump did what he always does, troll on Twitter, and then Biden responded. It was a big back and forth. All right, we'll keep you posted on that as today's program rolls along. Ben Joravsky, are you ready to find out what's going on in Chicago and or Illinois?
Absolutely. I was born ready.
I love that you're born ready every time you answer that, because coming up after this break, we are going to find out what else is news.
All right, I cannot wait. It's my favorite part of the day with Dr. Plucks that little trick from out his little sleeve. We'll see what it is when we return.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Benny J, take it away.
Will do. I will take it away and turn it right over to you, young man.
Oh, thanks. We're about to find out what's going on locally.
News.
It's time for What Else is News. Well, we got the wrong news script here. Let me pull up the right one here. And, okay, is this the one? All right, hang tight with me here. Okay, here we go. We're about to find out what's going on locally. Time for What Else is News. On May 20th, landslide Lori Lightfoot will become Chicago's 56th mayor. And thanks to Sunday's article from Andy Shaw in the Chicago Sun-Times, we are going to highlight the 6 ways that Mayor-elect Lightfoot can stay true to her good government promises as she heads into office. But first,
yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Bye, Bruce. The following comes from Crane's Chicago Business. And no, it's not from Crane's writer and the worst poker player in all of Chicago, Greg Hines. No.
No, I didn't write this one.
No, this comes from a fella named Dennis Rodkin. I'm sure he's bad at poker, too.
I don't know. I've never met him.
Apparently last week, a moving truck was spotted in front of the Winnetka home of former Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner, and it was reported Monday that Bruce Rauner and his wife have listed the Winnetka home for sale. Oh, poor guy. He loses the election. Now he's selling his house. But before you start to feel too bad for Bruce Rauner, you must hear this part. And listeners, get ready to not relate whatsoever. The Rauners are asking just under $3 million for their 8-bedroom Nantucket-style house on about half an acre. And according to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, the Rauners also have two downtown Chicago condominiums, both for some reason, in the same building on Randolph Street near Millennium Park. They have a 41st floor unit that they bought almost for about $1 million in 2008, and a 61st floor penthouse that they bought the same year for a little more than $4 million.
Wow.
These 2 condos are not on the market outside the Chicago area. The Rauners reportedly own several other homes, including about 23,000 acres on ranches in Wyoming and Montana, a waterfront mansion in Key Largo, Florida, and a Manhattan penthouse they bought for $10 million in 2005. My God, I hate this guy all over again.
It's been a while.
It's just getting over it. Now I hate him all over again. The Rauner family cannot be reached for comment.
Okay. Can't be reached for comment. Bruce Rauner, I'm getting nostalgic and weepy-eyed thinking about the mansion in Winnetka. One point, I think it was in 2016, I joined a group of protesters from Chicago, school parents who were protesting the inequitable way we finance public education in our state. They had to protest in Winnetka, and they went to Rauner's home, and nobody was there. I don't think anybody ever lived there, or nobody had lived there in recent days. And it was just sort of a sign of everything that we do wrong in the state of Illinois, that we so much of our public education is funded by property taxes, local property taxes. So the greater the amount of wealth a community has, the more money it could spend on education, the better, higher quality education they can offer their children, the more variety of courses and curriculum, smaller classrooms, wraparound services, kids having trouble, make sure they have a tutor. If there's kids are traumatized, make sure they have a counselor. All the things that children need to get a good start on life, and they were able to afford them in Winnetka and in Wilmette because they don't waste their property tax dollars on frivolous things like, just to name one, subsidizing Lincoln Yards, an upscale community, a gentrifying area. So I'm getting nostalgic thinking about how those protesters went to Rauner's home to sort of dramatize the inequities in Illinois. But have no fear, D. He has those 2 condos downtown, so he's doing okay. Obviously, he's not selling this home because they need to raise money to pay crucial bills. I guess I just want to get out of Winnetka, huh? So.
Getting nostalgic, huh? I'll play it again.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Yeah, maybe he's sick of funding the public schools of Winnetka. There it is. I'm sick of funding those schools. I hate teachers.
All right, now let's talk Mayor-elect Lori Lightfoot. Today is day 2 of Lightfoot meetings with city, county, and federal law enforcement officials to hammer out details of their joint plan to combat the traditional surge in summer violence. Her first meeting took place at Chicago Police Headquarters, and today she is meeting with city departments and agencies. No big updates to report on that. After all, she isn't the mayor until May 20th. But Andy Shaw of the Chicago Sun-Times and formerly of the Better Government Association wrote something on Sunday, and it would be great to get your opinion on it, Mr. Joravsky.
Okay.
The Andy Shaw article is a bit of a strategy guide for Lori Lightfoot as she heads into office. By the way, Lightfoot, also a former board member of the Better Government Association. She left in 2015. The article is titled "The 6 Ways That Mayor-elect Lightfoot Can Stay True to Her Good Government Promises" as she heads into office. Ben, let's go through these 6 ways. Andy Shaw writes, "Here are a few initiatives Lightfoot and her transition team could be considering prior to her inauguration. I can talk on May 20th, and we will start with
Number 1.
Number 1, evaluating city programs and services and city council committees to ascertain what's absolutely necessary and affordable and what could be scaled back, phased out, or merged with so-called sister agencies and their boards, CTA, CHA, Park District, and Public Building Commission, or even Cook County government, to minimize duplication and excess and achieve an economy of scale."
Yeah, this is a favorite theme of good government reformer types like Andy Shaw, that there's waste in public government. And Maya's been down. You know what? This is another. I'm going to write this down. Ask Maya what she thinks about consolidating government. The notion is that a lot of money could be saved by consolidating government. I don't know how much money. Every time I see the amount that could be saved, it's, I don't know, relatively speaking, not that much. So it's sort of a lot of energy spent on something that will not have a huge benefit. Plus, I always throw this out, and the good government people respectfully, or sometimes not respectfully, disagree with me, that in many ways, having somebody on the payroll is the most direct investment a city can make in itself, because generally they have to live in the city of Chicago if you're a city employee, and they're sometimes the backbones of a community. So I'm not so certain that always cutting the payroll is always in the best interest of the city of Chicago. So, you know, I don't always see eye to eye with my good government brothers and sisters. We'll see if what Maya thinks about that. I'm writing that down there.
All right, if you just tuned in, well, we're going over the 6 ways that Mayor-elect Lightfoot can stay true to her good government promises as she heads into office. We just did number 1, and it doesn't take no Daniel Biss to know what's next.
Number 2.
That's right, number 2. He's good at math,
Yeah,
guys,
no,
Daniel Biss.
Biss is really, and you are too, Dennis.
Oh, yeah, right.
2 comes after 1.
Oh, okay, sure. All right, number 2, reducing the size of the city council and making aldermen a full-time job by banning secondary employment, or at least second jobs that affect city tax dollars, programs, or services.
Well, I would put that under the category of duh. Should have been done a long time ago. That, of course, is we call the Ed Burke move. Ed Burke runs a property tax business while serving as an alderman of the 14th, while serving previously as the chair of the finance committee. And there's definitely something called a conflict of interest right there. So, yeah, I believe that aldermen should be full-time employees. And then if you're going to make them full-time employees, I'm not sure you want to cut the roles and responsibilities they have, because I would like to see aldermen being more of a check and a balance on the all-powerful mayor. So a lot of times when I see these calls to cut aldermen or restrict their powers or cut council committees, it's really giving more power to the mayor. I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Moving on.
Number 3.
The third way that Mayor-elect Lightfoot can stay true to her good government promises as she heads into the office: imposing term limits on local elected officials.
All right, term limits. We're right back to term. By the way, I think the voters of this here, Andy Shaw, if you're listening, I know you are. You love the show. Andy Shaw, here's what I'd ask you to do. You go call the Chicago Board of Elections and ask them what the vote was on the referendum, Pat Quinn's referendum on term limits on the mayor. When we try to have term limits, people always say we want term limits. So Pat Quinn tried to have term limits. Mayor Rahm brought his lawyers in to tie him up in knots. The case is still being argued. I don't know where it is right now, at an appellate court level, I think. Meanwhile, the voters got to vote. We don't know what the results of the election are. So term limits is one of those things people always call for. Then when Pat Quinn tried to do something about it, the powers that be kept it from actually happening. We don't even know what the result of the referendum is. So I would add to that list, instead of calling for term limits, see what the results were November's referendum were. I'm going to ask Doris Davenport about that. She used to work for Pat Quinn. Ask Doris Davenport about term limits. Got it, D.
Excellent. We've gone over 3 ways that Mayor-elect Lightfoot can stay true to her good government promises as she heads into office. 3 more to go, and it is now time for... Wait.
Number 4.
There we go. All right. Number 4. Ending or at least limiting, oh God, this topic again, aldermanic prerogative.
Oh, no, come on, Andy. You're too smart for that.
Ending or at least limiting aldermanic prerogative, absolute control over zoning, permitting, and development in their wards.
First of all, they don't have absolute control. They only have control when the mayor lets them. We've been down this road before, Andy. You weren't listening. I'm going to make you go through tutorial again, all right? In fact, everybody agreed with me. Maya agreed with me. Who else agreed with on this particular point? I kept throwing
Tommy Mac.
Tom McNamee agreed with me on this one. People who Mick Dumpke agreed with me on this one. They don't even have all this control. It's a phony issue made up to give more, again, to justify giving more power to the mayor. I hate to say it. So anyway, get that one off the list, Andy.
I have never heard of aldermanic prerogative until about 3 months ago, and now I just don't want to hear it anymore.
No, you never heard about it because it didn't exist. I go, let's go. It's like that lady who blamed everything on Maya. All the social inequities of the world are Maya's.
By the way, way to go, Maya.
Yeah, really. Thanks for nothing, Maya.
My goodness. All right, we got 2 more. Let's just do it real quick here. Let's do
Number 5.
Number 5, folding the functions of city treasurer and clerk into city government, or at least combining, good Lord, or combining the 2 elected offices into one. And we will just do the last one. Oh, I don't have it with
Number 6.
extending the authority of the inspector general to investigate and audit aldermanic committees and staffs.
All right, I'll give him 6, but 5, I'm not falling for that. I would like to have more oversight, not less. So that's, in general, my opinion when it comes to Chicago. When I look at Chicago government over the last 30 years, the problem is not the treasurer. The problem is not the clerk. The problem is not the alderman with their prerogatives. The problem lies with all-powerful mayors. That's how I view it.
So there you are. Just like that, you're now in the know of what's going on in Chicago, and now you will have an answer the next time someone asks you, hey, what else is news?
All right, let me tell you something.
Tell me.
That Andy Shaw, Andy of Mayberry, and
Andy Griffin?
That Andy. And Andy Siegel, a kid I went to high school with. They all agree. You did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Maya's sitting on deck. She's eager to talk. We'll bring her right on after this. At Chicagoland Cremation Options, we are committed to listening, educating, and guiding your family through the cremation process. Whether it is time of death or when planning your wishes for the future, Chicagoland Cremation Options can accommodate you at an affordable price and with great dignity. Avoid funeral home costs with direct access to a crematory for a cremation. Chicagoland Cremation Options, just south of O'Hare, 5 minutes west of Chicago. It's a family-owned business and operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Visit it at ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the bit. Well, you know we're on camera now. People can see that.
And they see that smooth dance moves.
That's a word for it. Yeah. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show.
All right, we are back. Maya Dumasova from the Chicago Reader is with me. And Maya, you were sitting there very patiently taking notes as Dennis was reading Andy Shaw's breakdown of what's wrong with the city of Chicago and what Mayor-elect Lightfoot should do to eradicate all that's wrong. You also heard me explain why you are personally responsible for social inequity because you deign to have a job and be in the workforce. This is the latest from the Republican Party, their strategies, their political strategies they had off. So those are two things. And you heard Joe Biden. Oh, my goodness, I got to get you.
Oh, my God. The best take I recently heard on Joe Biden was somebody tweeted that Joe Biden is the Democrats' Mitt Romney. And I don't think there could be a better take on Joe Biden.
Take the deep dive in that one.
Well, just the argument was that you could have beaten Barack Obama in 2012, but you ran Mitt Romney, who was just about the worst possible candidate. So between Joe Biden's connections to Wall Street and to various other, there was some articles in the Washington Post about Joe Biden's sons, having business dealings with shady Ukrainian business entities and oligarchs, and then like with Chinese intelligence officials. Basically this person's point was that, that Joe Biden is the Democrats' Mitt Romney. If they run him against Trump, like there is no surer way to lose this election.
So all the things that you heard when you heard Joe Biden speaking, what was he speaking to?
Have you ever seen Joe Biden's shirt?
No.
Have you ever seen him in a Senate hearing? Have you ever seen...
Wait, did you say his shirt?
Yeah, like
no.
the kind of shirts he wears. There is not a politician in Washington who has a more pristine and clean-cut wardrobe than Joe Biden. That is not a man. That is not middle-class Joe.
Yeah.
That is a rich man. That like the quality of his shirts and his ties and the way that they're tailored clearly communicates to me that this man is very rich. So no, I don't buy any of this campaign rally bullshit.
All right. Hey, it's a podcast. You can say what you want. All right. So you're not falling for the Joe Biden thing. All right, I wrote that down. Not falling for Joe Biden thing. Middle class Joe. And 39% of the Democrats in these early polls favor Biden. I presume, I know your attitude about polls in general. What's your thought about that, 39%?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not really surprised that he has so many people rooting for him. I do think that he has like a very long kind of a gas tank filled with kind of support and warm feelings accrued in the white middle class, especially over the years. So, Scranton Joe, I don't know, middle class Joe is kind of clunky, but I do remember people, I think in the past people refer to him as Scranton Joe. What was it, like Metro North Joe or Amtrak Joe or something like that?
Because he took the train
to
work.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm not so surprised that so many people are for him. I do think that he enjoys like very a lot of popularity with a certain demographic of people, and he has the name recognition. Obviously, like a lot of people I think will say that they're supporting Joe Biden because that's the person they know. So, yeah. But this is a classic situation of like, man, if the Democratic Party picks Joe Biden, like it's like they clearly have learned nothing
from 2016.
Yes, right.
All right, now let's talk about Elizabeth Warren. I mentioned this as well. I was just thinking about this when I was riffing. I'm going through my mind about Joe Biden when I heard he had 39% of the vote in a poll, and Bernie had 15%, and I believe, I'm doing this off of memory, 8% went to Elizabeth Warren. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Warren's been around a long time. So she has longevity. Elizabeth Warren is a senator, so she has achieved a certain level of success. Elizabeth Warren has generated more ideas about how to make government fair and how to fund government.
Not just ideas, things implemented.
Okay. She's at 8%. So off the top of my head, I said there's a bias in this country against people who are smart. And I'm going to rethink and think about that. But before I do, do you think there's a bias against Elizabeth Warren? And if you do, what is that bias?
So I think there's definitely, this sort of anti-intellectualism that's sort of very widespread in American society. Like, I think this has been around for a really long time. Like, it's always been a problem for, political candidates who come off as too cerebral. This was like, you remember George W. Bush, like people liked him because he was a guy they could have a beer with. You know what I mean? Like it's nothing new. But what worries me more, so yeah, I don't expect, like, of course there's going to be, people kind of on the right or Republican voters who not only have this kind of anti-intellectual bias, but also like, philosophical, ideological disagreements with her. But then recently I had a conversation with a young man who this really concerned me, and it really made me think about Elizabeth Warren and what, how successful she might be with younger voters. So, people were going crazy when she announced this whole idea for like forgiving student loan debt, and which that is going to obviously earn her a lot of support among millennials. But this young guy I was talking to, he was like in his early 20s. He's younger than I am. And generally I would say that like pretty lefty kind of guy, like, he's young. He's like a recent college graduate. But in general, he's not in the conservative bucket of people out there. Mm-hmm. But he was telling me, he was like, yeah, I really like Kamala Harris. And I was like, what? Like, why do you like Kamala Harris? He was like, I don't know, I just like her. And I was like, well, what about Liz Warren? And he was like, yeah, but I feel like she's yelling at me. And I thought about it. And so we had like a little bit of a back and forth. And I tried to explain to him, like, look, like everything I know about you is that you kind of like stand for these, like you're against racism and racial inequality, and like Kamala Harris is like somebody who was not at all a progressive prosecutor, like somebody who, like, there's like all kinds of stories out there about her time as a prosecutor. They're just like, they're not, it's like she doesn't have a record of being a progressive. Like, she might be a charismatic, interesting candidate or whatever, but it seems strange to me that a person with the kind of beliefs and attitudes of this young man would be like into Kamala Harris. So, but then I kept thinking about what he said about Elizabeth Warren, and I was kind of annoyed because, I mean, like, this guy's like, a college educated guy and whatever, but I was like, why, like, people really do get intimidated by things that sound complicated. And I think that there's always going to be this thing working, kind of a sexist thing working against Elizabeth Warren, where people are just by default gonna like, if she and Bernie said the same exact thing, which in a lot of cases they do, mm-hmm. people take it better coming from this like old man than they do from this woman. And but I do think that there has to be this. The other thing is, like, this young man was still talking about this whole thing with the DNA kit and Native American ancestry. Mm-hmm. Like, I think a lot of people hearing this college debt forgiveness plan were like, fuck this, like, this like horrible communications idiocy about this DNA kit, which was just dumb. Like, I'm sure that Elizabeth Warren, like, somebody advised her to do that to mm-hmm. connect to millennials, yeah. and she probably did that, and she's probably hopefully realizing now that what you need to do to connect to young people isn't DNA kits, isn't to try to prove that you're Native American, but to actually talk about policies. So my point being is that I think that the way that something about her makes, like, people sense that she's smarter than them, and or that somehow that there's this vibe. I don't know if she's actually smarter than a regular person, but she is a very smart lady, and she gives off that vibe. And I think that it's, on one hand, it's like good that she's unapologetic about it. On the other hand, it's like important to realize that this works on people, mm-hmm. and your average voter is not going to go that deep and figure out what the policies are. Like, they're going to go with their gut. And so with everything else that's going to be kind of working against her, given the very, very kind of progressive, very left-leaning policies that she's proposing, like, I think that her campaign really has to work on messaging and on presenting her as being more personable in a way that's that doesn't dumb her down, but that also makes her relatable. I heard something on the radio over the weekend where somebody was covering, it was like an NPR coverage of one of her rallies in Iowa, or like a town hall. And they had an interview afterwards with the lady who had asked Elizabeth Warren what she was going to do about the tariffs, because this lady is a soybean farmer and she's really suffering because of like the tariffs and the trade war with China, and she's not able to sell her soybeans. And I guess Elizabeth Warren like dodged the question and talked about something else. And this woman was like very like unhappy about that. So I think that there's kind of this danger of like coming, taking up this place in the race as being like the policy wonk. And maybe she didn't answer the soybean tariff question because she didn't have like a specific answer for that particular issue right at that moment. And she didn't want to maybe she just didn't want to like bloviate about it and not and say something in concrete. But the lady came away with the impression that Elizabeth Warren did not answer her question. And I think that I don't know if Elizabeth Warren has the sort of self-confidence to handle situations like this and say you know what, right now, I don't have a policy proposal for you, but still connect with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People will forgive a lot of people will forgive a lot of not knowing things. You know what I mean? But the thing about being like a smarty pants is that then if you put yourself in a position where you have all the answers and then you don't, and then you're kind of insincere about that's what people don't like.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. There is an effective way to acknowledging that you don't know everything.
Right.
And
it doesn't make you look weak.
Yeah,
I don't think it makes you look weak. Not for an American electorate. I don't think that people don't like insincerity.
But I feel as though what you're getting at here is that there's a bias against women who are running for the highest office in the land. We saw it with Hillary Clinton. And in a way to, how do I put this, show that they're capable of handling all the responsibilities they'll have as president of the United States without scaring people or irritating people by looking too smart. Miles Porter has entered the building. Miles Porter has entered. Love it when my editor comes in the building. But and so I think that's a problem that male candidates don't have. I don't think there's this inherent bias.
Yeah, there's going to be more leeway for them. Look at Joe Biden. His entire career is filled with all kinds of slip-ups and wrong calls and actually awful positions that he's staked out for himself that he never backed down from or apologized for. The whole thing with Anita Hill, all of it. You know what? If that, women, unfortunately, there's a higher standard for women. Women can't mess up. So I think that the only way to fight back against that is to stake out a sincere position and work on connecting with people personally.
All right, and
because people are never going to forgive her for being. People are never going to forgive her for being haughty.
Yeah,
a lot of people are going to hold that against her.
Sam Holloway has entered the building. Love it when my guests come early. And not just Joe Biden. I don't know if we talked about this the last time on the show. Peter Buttigieg, Mayor Pete. I mean.
Look at that. That's
that
a guy
gets
whose
away
entire
with,
candidacy is coasting on some sort of perceived sincerity. That.
Yeah, he is. I mean, Elizabeth Warren has policies, position papers for virtually every issue confronting America today. Pete Buttigieg has no policy papers, or very few. I'm exaggerating when he said no, I'm sure, but they're not specific. He clearly hasn't spent a lot of time thinking about what he would do if he were elected president. And yet he's there was articles this Pete frenzy that's going on.
Yeah.
So there is a double standard. There's absolutely a double standard. Women have to do their homework, men do not. You understand what I'm saying?
And so the thing is that that is the reality, and it's awful, but it's like a long march to change that. And in the meantime, we're talking about having to winning in the next 2 years against the president who just makes people feel really great about the positions they have, about their imperfections. People who like Donald Trump feel great about the kind of person he is and the way that he makes them feel. You know what I mean? It's all affect, all of it. We literally have somebody in the White House and an entire government bureaucracy filled with people who are just coasting on affect. Like, and there's some ideologues in there, but very few. Besides, like, you know, people like Stephen Miller or whatever. Like, there's just people whose entire political careers have been built on making people feel a certain way. And so, I think that if the left is gonna, and this is actually exactly what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does so well. I mean, yes, she's got the smarts, she's got the position paper, she's got the big ideas and big policy proposals, but at the end of the day, she connects. And so I think Elizabeth Warren's biggest problem right now is she needs to work on connecting. With more than just me and you, because we're, you know, it's preaching to the choir.
Yeah, no, and maybe the secret is Joe Biden then. I mean, Joe Biden will never, just based on what you said, Donald Trump makes people feel good about themselves because he has all these flaws and he's unabashed about putting them out there. Joe Biden, the same thing could be said about him. Right. He's got many flaws. He can hardly get into a sentence without getting into trouble by the time he exits the sentence. It's like our former mayor, Mayor Daley. He was the same way. Well, I can connect. He's really relatable. So maybe that's the way to fight. That's why he's ahead of maybe that's what the message is with the 39%. I don't know. All right. I cannot let you leave. There's so much to ask you about. I have to ask you about this essay, which I commanded you to read. I don't think you read it.
I did read it.
You did read
I got the Sunday New York Times.
No, you have. You actually have.
Yes.
I should make Sam Holloway read this essay. This essay is, in my interpretation of this essay, is the Republican Party. I talked about this at the outset of the show. It's Helen Andrews' essay in the Sunday New York Times. What is that? The Week in Review section, Sunday Review section, where she sort of lays out the Republican approach to income inequity by blaming women in the workforce. Essentially, that's the number one culprit, women in the workforce.
The thing, it was like, it's insane. Like, she's like talking about fucking Phyllis Schlafly and how there's really no inheritor or kind of heir to. For those who don't know, Phyllis Schlafly was like the premier anti-feminist
of the 70s.
In the 70s, yeah. She like championed the fight against the Equal Rights Amendment, and so this person's argument is like, that the conservative movement doesn't have its Phyllis Schlafly, and there's this big problem going on with like, women who, this is like my brain just was like turns inside out trying to relate what this person is arguing, but basically it's like. You shouldn't be privileging women who want to work by creating social welfare policies like universal pre-K or whatever, childcare, because then the women who don't want to work and stay at home with their families are going to be disadvantaged unfairly, and our policies shouldn't be unfairly like working against women who want to stay home with their families. And then she quotes Tucker Carlson, that intellectual luminary of our times. And this is the most insane. This is like one of the most insane parts of this. She talks about, Mr. Carlson noted that manufacturing, a quote male-dominated industry, has declined while female-dominated fields like education and healthcare have remained strong. And this is part of her argument that like as more women entered the workforce, they basically were. This is like the same argument people make about like immigrants driving wages down.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's their fault.
Forget like and then this whole thing from Tucker Carlson is like somehow weaving this into it, saying that like it's because women are in the workforce that quote unquote female dominated fields are surging. Like, forget the fact that if you're a man, you could become a nurse.
Yes,
you could become a teacher. Like our economy is changing, and the fact that it's like quote unquote women dominated fields that are still growing and booming compared to manufacturing has nothing like it. It's not because women shouldn't be in the workforce. So anyway, all of this is like just so incredibly dumb. I really can't recommend anyone waste their time reading this.
Except that this is the ideology, this is the spin that the Republican Party will put on the problems that we face. And so here's the problem. In order to get to prevent us from electing someone like Elizabeth Warren, who would confront head-on issues of social inequity by changing our tax policies, let's say, or by changing the way we finance public education or the way students are obligated to pay off college loans. Instead of doing something very systematic and specific about dealing with inequity, they want to give us gobbledygook like this to sort of undercut the argument of Elizabeth Warren and undercut the argument of the progressives in the Democratic Party and reelect Donald Trump. And that's what's frightening about it.
Well, I mean, yeah, but this seems like even not in the same ballpark as this is like some other thing. I mean, Donald Trump's like signature family like policy is like Ivanka's paid leave thing, childcare tax subsidy or whatever. Like even that is like some kind of. I
it's
mean,
more progressive than this.
Right. I mean, this woman, this writer Helen Andrews, like she talks in this piece about how there's like a cross ideological consensus now that like that women are in the workforce. Like, how do we make it so that there isn't a gender pay gap? Like right wing, left wing, think tanks, whatever. Everybody's talking about the wage gap being a problem, and she's saying that it's like women being in the workforce that's creating this gender wage gap. It's like an argument about invasive species. It's like, oh, we have, like in Australia, they have like this out of control problem with like toads and feral cats and all of these like populations that are out of control that were like introduced there who don't belong there and have no natural enemies. So then like other animals are introduced to like hunt those animals, and then that throws the system out of balance. It's like the problem is capitalism. Like the basic problem here is that women can be employers get away with paying women less because of like patriarchy and other social forces that put women in a position not only to be working in jobs that are less likely to be unionized, but also to be to like take all kinds of abuse essentially. And that's the root of this issue. It's not that women are working. It's that like women are not treated equally by employers. I mean, honestly, folks, if you're going to read anything from that issue, I really recommend you skip right past this under review and go to the Sunday Business section, which has a very similarly, actually, I guess we have a camera now. A very similarly styled front page article, which also yellow, right? And I wonder if they did it on purpose. The headline is "Women did everything right. Work got greedy," and it's a whole big feature about how the gender pay gap is largely driven by disparities in pay in jobs where men. Where people basically that people who work longer than 50 hours a week in like service professionals, like law firms, whatever, client services type of fields, that those jobs, when people work more than 50 hours a week, these are like non-unionized sectors, they make disproportionately more money. But it's really only men that can take on those jobs because it's men who are like it's women who take on usually take on childcare responsibilities, and more men get promoted to jobs where they can then work way longer hours and make way more money. So. Being there's like a pull quote here that kind of sums it up. Being willing to work 50% more doesn't mean you make 50% more. You make like 100% more. So anyway, it's kind of a very data-driven story, but it's interesting, and it really takes on this issue of like the wage gap and how to solve it, and like what the driving problems are. Well, from an actual,
I would say that. The essay that ran in the Sunday section by Helen Andrews is an example of what I would call conservative affirmative action. All right, now, Sam, you think about this, and maybe ask you to address it, that liberal newspapers like the New York Times lower the bar on what is an acceptable intellectual argument in order.
No, I disagree.
Wait, let me get my statement out before you at least know what I'm saying before you disagree with it. They lower the bar on what is an acceptable intellectual argument that would justify so much real estate in their newspaper because they want to appear open-minded and even-handed and give the right its stand. So they've given that's the front page. You show it to the camera, people can see it. It's the front page. It gives a lot of space to what, as you point out, is really just a seriously flawed, inconsistent argument, which totally is contradicted by the data-driven. Yeah, look at all the space they give to this argument that somehow or other women are the reason that women in the workforce is the reason there's social inequity. So I call that affirmative action for conservatives, where they feel compelled to give the conservative point of view a prominent place in their newspaper, even if even if it couldn't stand the rigor of analysis.
Let me tell you two things. First of all, there's absolutely nothing fresh about the criticism of the New York Times opinion section, which has been like now almost completely taken over by these right-wing pseudo-intellectuals. Like everybody's had that conversation already. And the other thing is like, I mean, I think that the New York Times' consideration about something like this is much more pragmatic. Like this is there for me and you and the Upper West Siders to get all foaming at the mouth about and be tweeting about and be attracting attention to this goddamn paper, and for people to be clicking and reading this thing. This is there for the advertising
so it's not
revenue.
Even it's just clickbait. It's not even affirmative action.
That's what I think Arthur Sulzberger
for
is doing with this. You know what I mean? And Dean Baquet. But the other thing is, like, I do not agree that the intellectual standards are lowered for this like right-wing drivel. There is a lot of really bad writing in the New York Times on a regular basis that's not from a right-wing perspective. They publish all kinds of half-baked, not very well-written stuff. So honestly, as a piece of writing, this is really not the worst I've seen lately.
Okay, but fair enough. But as an argument, it is so flawed. As an argument,
it's awful.
It's awful. And look at, again, the real estate again.
Well, you know what? But, you know, some illustrator got a job out of this.
Well, then
congratulations to them.
Yeah. And let's hope they were paid handsomely. All right. I must ask you about Andy Shaw's recommendations from the BGA. And as you know, this kind of feeds into something else you wanted to talk about. And maybe we should bring Sam into this conversation, because this sort of sounds like Sam Holloway country as well. But the preciousness of liberals in the day and age of Mayor Rahm and Lori Lightfoot here in the city of Chicago. But before we do that, just your thoughts when you heard the general notion of good government reformers is that the first steps that our mayor election make is to consolidate divisions of government, cut the number of jobs that exist, and that'll be the first road to reforming. And that's reform is in quotes. So you heard that. What's your general thoughts on that?
I mean, a lot of this is like very innocuous, but I do, you know, what you said about consolidating government and getting rid of superfluous jobs and all that stuff. Like, I think that, yeah, like in Illinois, this conversation has been going on since like the 80s, if not earlier. Like Dick Simpson has been writing reports about the sort of unnecessary amount of, you know, duplicative government work that's going on out there. And while, you know, there are a lot of probably like inefficiencies or inconsistencies because we have so many different layers of local government and so many different government agencies that are all performing kind of adjacent tasks. I do think that this is also kind of a this like neoliberal dog whistle of like, oh, we need more efficiency, so like let's get rid of these jobs and like outsource this work to like these experts, you know, whose entire reason for being is to like perform this work. Yeah. Like, look at what R. Mark did in CPS schools. Like, you outsource janitorial services and then you pay this contractor and then you still get filthy schools.
Yeah.
Like, right. Like, who is it easier to get good results out of? Like, people who are directly employed by you versus contractors. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, there is still like, there's several, this I guess is probably more of a county, a county government problem now, but there are still offices that are like kind of rife with patronage. I mean, there's still offices, county government offices. I'm thinking in particular like Dorothy Brown's office, the clerk of the circuit court, where there's tons of people who just sit there all day and don't do anything, and you know, who knows what their like job, you know, performance, like how their job performance is measured, or how effective they are at what they do. do. But that's a problem with the leadership of that office. Like, God knows the clerk needs those positions to be like doing work, to actually be handling the work that office has to handle, like dealing with millions of cases. But that's a problem, at the top. That's a problem with the kind of office culture that Dorothy Brown has created, not with the fact that there are those jobs. Like, getting contractors into those jobs is not going to solve the problem.
That is Maya Dukmasova, and we got Sam Holloway sitting on deck. We're going to bring him on right after this.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. Music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's CORP as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments.
Ben, they can see you dancing now.
Oh, no!
Gotta remember that, dude.
Man, they go, God, is he smooth on his feet?
Yeah, just keep thinking they're thinking that. All right, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Tuesday, April 30th is moments away. But before we get into the second hour, we have to remind all you guys the Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by unions. A few of them, in fact, like the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9. Oh, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Thank you once again to those unions for jumping on board with us and bringing back the Ben Joravsky Show. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Tuesday, April 30th. And live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, we still got Maya Dukmasova in studio. We welcome firefighter Sam Holloway, and still to come, political talk host Doris Davenport. And now your host. He thinks he's a good dancer. Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Yes, indeed. I convinced Maya to stay. I locked the door. I wouldn't let her leave. And Sam, I welcome Sam Holloway to the studio. And all right, a little backdrop on Sam and myself. Let's see. He's my neighbor. I see him occasionally when he's walking his dog. He's a firefighter for the city of Chicago, but the views expressed by Sam Holloway are not necessarily those of the Chicago Fire Department. How about that, Sam Holloway?
I would say that's an understatement.
Okay. He is also been known. I've gotten in trouble with Sam in the past by saying he's a Green Party activist. So I like to say he more he occasionally votes for the Green Party. How about that? Is that a
Well,
fair?
because they're occasionally on the ballot, so that's accurate.
Okay, that would be accurate. And the way I got to know Sam, I wrote about him for the Reader. So let's just go back and talk about this one more time. I love this story very much. In about 2011, when Rahm was recently elected, people forget about this. They talk about this is very interesting. These days, Rahm's getting all this love and attention and pats on the back of Sam Holloway because in his second term, he raised taxes. I'm showing a Sun Times story, gives him credit for raising taxes to pay the pension obligations. In 2011, he had a different strategy for dealing with our pension obligations. What he did was tell municipal employees that he was going to cut the pensions. And as such, he was visiting firehouses throughout the city, and he walked into the firehouse where Sam Holloway, my guest, who was right across the table from me, worked, which I believe wasn't on, it doesn't matter where it was, but I think it was on the near north side. Anyway, he walked in and he effectively said, I'm going to cut your pensions. Okay, go ahead.
It's a little more complicated than that. What he did first, you have to remember, we had just lost, at the time we just lost a couple of people in the line of duty, and one of them was very popular. Many people knew him. I'd even worked with him a few times. Really nice guy. And his pretext for entering the firehouse, and knowing Rahm, maybe he can multitask like that emotionally. Maybe he was sincere in coming by to offer his condolences and say how he'd just met with the family, and everybody in my firehouse knew this guy. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, well, this is pretty classy, I know he's capable of it, but it was still a surprise. So he gets done with that, and right away, without missing a beat, okay, now I want to talk about your pensions. And that's where he said,
go ahead.
That's where he said what you were getting to, which is we're going to have to make some tough choices, which in neoliberal speak means you all are going to take a cut.
So it was, on top of everything else, it was salt to the wound to come in.
To me, it was.
On the pretext of paying respect to a firefighter who died in the cause, and not just leaving. If he had just come in and said, you know what, guys, I have a lot of love and respect for the job you do and the risks you take, and I got to leave. I just wanted to let you know that.
Right.
But to follow it up right away, sort of undercuts the message of love and respect he has.
Absolutely. And I can't speak for anyone else, but that was my emotional reaction to it. I can't say offended, because it's like, his very appearance, I'm just expecting something bad when he shows up because of who he is. So he can't really offend me, but it was a negative response. So I was motivated at that point when he started talking about that to bring up that thing that I'd been reading about at the time, which was the Robin Hood tax, or the LaSalle Street tax, as I like to call it now. And because I wasn't saying it to convince him, obviously, but here he was blowing smoke up the asses of like 20 firefighters. He was doing it right at dinner time, where we were about to eat. You don't want to make me wait to eat. So he was doing that, and on top of the insult of doing that on the heels of what he had just done. So I was like, screw this. So I raised my hand very politely, and I said, well, I have a solution. And there, I think we've covered. You want me to go ahead and?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. All right. But some people may not have heard this one. Yeah.
So memories is getting. I'm getting older. Memories fading. But I do remember saying I have a possible solution.
Yeah.
And I sort of broke it down. I said, throughout this crisis that sort of began supposedly in 2007, 2008, people losing their homes. The mortgages are all their mortgages are all underwater. Who did we bail out? Wall Street. We didn't bail out Main Street. We bailed out Wall Street. So all these people are left high and dry, and we've given billions of dollars to the people that created the crisis. Now, I'm not talking about stringing them up. I'm talking about a modest solution that we can do right here that can help us right now, and it's a financial transactions tax. You can charge a minuscule amount, like let's say a penny on $100, and with the trillions of dollars flowing through these exchanges, you can generate dozens of millions of dollars a year at least, and you can start to deal with some of these pension shortfalls. No one gets hurt. You don't have to raise property taxes or sales taxes on working people. These traders aren't really going to be hurting. It's a solution that's worked in other places. It's just waiting on us to find the political will. And you could see my colleagues. I didn't really notice because I'm on fire at this point.
Yeah, you're
I'm
focused.
fired up. I'm like on my soapbox. This is what I do on Twitter. You've seen it.
Yeah.
Twitter actually contains me because I get emotional.
Yeah.
So I'm getting fired up.
Yeah.
And the guys told me later because they weren't really listening to what I was saying
Yeah.
so much as the fact that I was saying it. So they said that he was getting a little squirrely and his bodyguards were getting closer to him because there's this big 6'4" black guy getting animated.
Yeah.
And they don't expect when a black man gets animated that he's going to just be talking about policy. So which is all I was doing.
Yeah.
But he was listening. Rahm Emanuel was listening. And he saw exactly where I was going. I think he knew as soon as I opened my mouth and started talking about it, so he knew where I was going with it. And he said, you know what, I don't support that, very calmly. I don't support that. And I think if you go downstate to the legislature, you'll find that there's no one else that supports that, and we don't want to be penalizing an industry or this and that. And I said, okay. And he said, at the end of it, he just said, well, if you think this is such a good idea, maybe you should run for office. And I said, you know what, maybe I will. And that was the end of it.
Yeah. All right. And that was 2000. I remember 2011.
Yes.
He left shortly thereafter.
Right away.
And I think it was my wife, who knows your wife,
Yes.
told me about it. And I called Sam up. It was love ever after. And I remember saying to you, are you sure you want me to write about this, Sam?
hell
Are you sure you want me to write about this? Because I don't
Absolutely.
want you getting transferred down to... And there was no retaliation, was there? Or was there?
No, because no one cares. And this gets... I know you were going to... I don't want to get into what you wanted to talk about too early, but again, you remember the guy who you wanted to call to verify the story?
Yeah.
I think he was the only other one that was paying attention to what I was saying.
Yeah.
To the substance of what I was saying, not the fact that I was mouthing off to the mayor.
Yeah.
Progressive taxation is kind of a left-wing, left-liberal concept. I work, as I've told you, in an environment which is predominantly reactionary. The word tax itself is a four-letter word to these guys. I don't know where you want to add a letter, an extra.
I was going to say.
Whatever you want to do.
I'm not Dan Biss, but I know that tax has 3 letters.
Don't worry about the math. That's not important.
Yeah.
I'm one of the few people on the job that has to use math.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so the idea of instituting a tax was right over their heads.
Yeah.
It's not that they can't comprehend it. It's just not something they're going to get behind. And just as a footnote to that story, one of the solutions, it's a stopgap, but one of the solutions that was implemented for our pension crisis was to do a 2-tiered thing, where I would keep getting what I was promised,
Right.
in theory.
A new hire.
The new hires would have to work longer
Yeah.
and get less and pay more.
Yeah.
And that's how they bust a union.
Yes.
That's how they set up younger workers to have resentment and acrimony towards the older unionized labor.
Yes, and the union leadership, because they're all older guys who are going to retire, and part of the membership of our union is retirees. A decisive plurality is retirees who haven't kicked the bucket yet. So these are all the people who are okay with selling out. And I'm not trying to knock the union for doing this, because, well, maybe I am, but let's be realistic. This is how unions operate. I think the Chicago Symphony Orchestra just
did
This
the
is
same
exactly
thing.
what they just
Just did the same thing. We've had Steve Uster in that chair talking for 2 times, one of the members of the union.
And you were going to ask about what was a liberal frailty?
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
That's a Maya topic. But we'll get
I
to
think
it.
I'm not going to knock my colleagues, my union sisters and brothers, for getting the best deal they could in this political and socioeconomic environment. The deal that the new hires are getting isn't terrible. It's better than you're going to get in some cities.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is, this is the maneuvering they had to do to get a deal that wasn't going to be cutting our own throats.
Yeah,
completely.
Well, the political reality of where Chicago was, where the state of Illinois was, and where the Democratic Party was in 2011, it had moved to the right, and it was almost, it had come to the point where Democrats were speaking on a regular basis like Republicans in the traditional standard. And so they were saying to their union brothers and sisters who had supported the Democratic Party for all these years, at least the union chieftains had, we're going to take away from you. And what's interesting, Sam, I always like to point this out. When Ron visited your firehouse was about 2 years after all of Chicago, including corporate Chicago and Rahm and the political establishment, was supporting Mayor Daley's Olympics. And there was more than enough money for the Olympics. They were writing a blank check for the Olympics. When they didn't get the Olympics, boom, we have a financial crisis. We have to cut pensions. I watched it in real time.
Well, that keeps happening. This happens so frequently, Ben. I mean, you talk about taxing a progressive tax on billionaires, and everyone whines. You'll see opinion pieces in every major newspaper telling you how horrible an idea that is, and it's socialism, and we can't stifle innovation. The Notre Dame Cathedral has a catastrophic fire. How much did billionaires raise overnight? How much are they willing to give to? And don't get me wrong, I love the cathedral. I've walked up it. It was gorgeous. It's a tragic loss, but I'd rather put that repair off and get the water system in Flint, Michigan fixed first.
Yeah, actually, this is making me think about like something I've been interested in discussing with like union folks and organizers, and just to kind of get people's perspective on this. I feel like there's a lot of there's a dog.
Wait, time out. Doris Davenport has entered the building. I love it when my guests come early with her dog. What's the dog's name again? Mr. Precious Love. Mr. Precious Love. She named it
Mr. Precious Love. I'm about to tweet a picture, y'all. So
Mr. Precious Love. Name for a Jerry Butler song.
So
I'm the only one who knows that.
I feel like there's. I'm curious what possibilities there might be in sort of radicalizing firefighters. You said that there are a lot of them are quite conservative, and taxation is a 4-letter word, but I feel like firefighters and the police department union sort of get lumped in together. But I wonder if there are actually things that, like, would the firefighters actually support the city shifting its spending priorities in a way that would be kind of different from the cops, because they're invested maybe in a different way in how the city spends its money?
The best way I can answer that question is to attach it to the reality of our residency requirements. Just about every city employee, as far as I know, every city employee is required to live within the city limits. Now, I can almost guarantee you, if that residency requirement was lifted within 2 years, at least half the fire department would be out of the city.
Oh yeah, same thing with the police department.
Yes.
Yeah.
My point being, and again, when they retire, there are very few who you'll hear saying, "Oh, I want to stay here for the rest of my life." The investment in the city is tied to that employment, and that's it. Admittedly, I kind of...
All right, I am now going to defend cops and firefighters on this point, so get ready for this.
I don't think that you should lump them together.
Well, I will lump them together.
Or do you feel like it's fair to lump them together?
Okay, can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question?
I'll hold off my defense of cops and firefighters till you answer.
The jobs are different. The demands of the job are different, and the political... and I guess you could say the effect that the demands of the jobs have on the individual politics and the collective, bargaining unit politics may be different. But in my observation, I've not met too many cops. I've known a few personally, but my guess is that they tend to live in the same neighborhoods. They come from the same schools. They are in the same families. They coach the same sports teams. The political culture, there's a lot of, it's the Venn diagram is practically a circle. So while the cops have a different job, and you'll even hear firefighters half seriously say, oh, I wouldn't want that job, or you know, but they politically, if you look at their breakdown of how they vote, the ones who do, it's probably very similar.
Yeah, right.
And look at some of our Northwest Side aldermen. There's one who was a cop and a firefighter.
Yeah, Anthony Napolitano, yeah.
And I'm going to guess I don't think there's going to be a lot of firefighters who voted for John Arena.
All right, let me defend cops and firefighters on this point. Before you came on the show, Sam, Dennis was doing the news, and he was reading a Sun Times article written by Andy Shaw, who used to be the head of the BGA and represents sort of the classical good government approach to Chicago reform. And he put the air quotes up, but everybody could see it. We're on TV. And I've been dealing with reformers in the city of Chicago since I moved here in 1981. It didn't start with Andy Shaw. There's sort of a worldview that reformers have, good government types, about Chicago and what has to be changed to make Chicago a better, more efficient city. All right. I've supported them in some of their initiatives down through the years with the articles I've written. When I write articles that talk about the redistribution of money in the city, the way money is doled out, I don't get much support from good government types. Okay, so when I write articles about our TIF program, for instance, and how it's financing upscale developments and gentrifying areas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I've been doing this for 20 years now, I've never gotten a lot of support from good government type. I'll get support from them.
David Orr supports you.
David Orr,
the good government
okay,
type.
I would say David Orr is in a different category than he's more of a progressive politician who has connections to the Harold Washington redistribution of funds. So I don't view him as the exact prototype of what I'm talking about. The quintessential reformer community, which has links into corporate Chicago and is about making government more efficient. All right, they're not there with me when I write about, hey, this is unfair and this is a waste of money and this is taking public dollars and giving it to rich people who don't need it. Cops and firefighters generally will support me on these. I'll get emails, I'll get texts. There was a cop who went before the city council wearing a Trump shirt about 2 weeks ago, denouncing the Lincoln Yards TIF deal. I give him credit. I don't give him credit for the Trump shirt, obviously, but I give him credit for speaking out against the TIF. And he said, you're going to come back in 2 or 3 weeks, city council, and you won't have money for our pensions, but you got money for this. So I give cops and firefighters to a certain degree credit for following this link to the way money is wasted in the city of Chicago and the way handouts to the rich are portrayed as economic development.
Right. You won't catch me saying that they're dummies, because that's kind of ableist anyway. But the issue is the same with reactionaries. It's the same with liberals. The issue is not that we're not capable of understanding these things. It's that we operate from a moral structure, a moral framework, which refuses to allow us to accept these things. So a cop with a MAGA shirt knows what's going on. He knows what's happening, and he can stand up and complain about it. But when you ask him, okay, what should we do differently? That's when he's going to differ from me. It's going to be a 180.
Right.
So I wish you'd have been there. This was years ago at the Copernicus Center when there was a group of aldermen and state representatives who got together. They were invited by, I think that's how it worked. They were invited by the police unions and the fire union to discuss the pension crisis. And I couldn't resist. I went, because you know what I wound up doing when they went to the Q&A. I gave
Getting in trouble again.
But it was just funny. My representative, Ann Williams, at one point, this is just to give you an idea of who was in the audience. At one point, she said it was so mild. It was like she was doing this like as a suggestion of some distant possibility in the future. Maybe we might want to look at things like a graduated income tax. a couple of guys in the back shouted, "Communist!" I'm thinking, oh my God, these Nazis.
Communist.
And
Oh, Lord.
and then there was a guy who stood up and got angry, not disrespectful, but he was angry. He was visibly upset because he said that we were wasting money on the public schools. This is a guy who looked to be old enough to have kids, maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess, okay, this guy, if he's got kids, they must be putting them in Catholic schools, like most of my colleagues. But, and he was a cop, by the way. But, so yeah, it's one thing to recognize the game is rigged. It's another thing to say, okay, if we're going to fix this or replace it, what are we going to replace it with? What is the way to do things? And that's where the devil's in those details.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other thing I feel like layers on top of this is that, yes, the game is rigged, but in the meantime, there's also the way that the city chooses to prioritize its spending, outside of the TIF program, like what they allocate for various city services. No one gets more money than the police department. How does your budget stack up with how does the fire department?
I don't think we're close. We're pretty expensive, but see, no one complains about it.
Right. So here's my point.
Actually, that's not true. But finish your point.
So my point is that if that same person who's wearing the Trump shirt, who's complaining about Lincoln Yards, you then turn around and say, okay, what if we take 10, 15, 20% of the police department budget and put that into mental health care and public health care services, which, by the way, the fire department is the one that's dealing on the front lines with those healthcare emergencies.
Because
people are.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, but, well, they are there because they get called out.
Yeah.
But when you need an ambulance, it's the fire department that comes. It's the public health functions of all the city institutions that perform public health functions. I'm not talking about the Department of Public Health. I'm talking about first responders.
Right.
It's the firefighters that deal with the health aspect of things. There's so many cops that don't even give first aid. They don't have first aid training. They don't give first aid to people they shoot. So if you turned around and said to the same police officer, okay, well, here's the pool of money we're working with. What if we reallocated some of that money into more robust city-funded healthcare operations?
Well,
I don't think you would get an easy yes from that person.
I think, again, this goes back to the politics of the people we're talking about. I have heard, and I'm not going to name names or locations, but I have heard on more than one occasion, and I have to put a little bit of the blame on the TV news because they portray certain dynamics, certain things that are going on in our city in such a way that it makes it easy to pathologize people and see them as less than human, such as the supposed epidemic of shootings. The coverage that I see is decontextualized. It's almost like highlights from, they may as well put it in the sports section of the news because the way they say, oh, these people were shot, they put a camera on someone who was there, and they're usually not the most articulate person by, university standards.
Also, it's the worst day of their lives.
It's exactly. They're under stress and they're coping as best they can. And I've heard people refer to those people are animals, and again, put it in context. Maybe these people who are saying this are suffering their own trauma. Maybe this is such a horrible inhuman prospect, and this is how they deal with it with gallows humor. Okay, I'm giving them benefit of the doubt, but take that for what it's worth. But I've even heard at one point there was a couple of weekends where there were just a dozen shootings here, 20 shootings there, and then I heard, oh, what's the over/under for next weekend? So, and these are first responders. Can you imagine how the cops must talk? Not all of them, obviously, but these are not the people. It's not our job to be mental health. We're not a mental health care facility, like you were saying. That's something. And then now you're also getting into what is mental illness? What causes it? Is it an individual thing or is it a societal issue? Now you're getting into other types of investment. What causes mental illness? What's causing these shootings? I never see anyone on the TV news talk about that. What is causing this violence?
Well, that's part of the problem. When we talk about the No Cop Academy,
those people are talking about that.
no,
though.
I know, but what I'm saying is that the opposition to a No Cop Academy as a symbol, spending the money on building an academy as a symbol of the priorities in the city, how they're out of skewed. I always wanted people to talk about, well, what happens in the academy? What are we teaching cops? What are we teaching firefighters? To deal. It's a very difficult job that they have,
Right.
and the pressures that they're facing are immense, and the lack of support that they're getting in general from society just on mental health issues alone that you both alluded to. So what are we actually teaching in the academy?
Right, but those two things are inseparable because they're fully integrated. You can't, and I know you're not trying to, but I think we have to remember the society that, what's the term I'm looking for here, that disinvests from communities that are already marginalized, that are already under pressure. You disinvest from them. And instead of reinvesting in them, finding out what they really need and investing in that, you're building Fort Apache. It's not just a question of this is a better expenditure than this. This is diametrically opposed to what the community needs, and you're putting it right in the middle of the community. These young kids at the No Cop Academy, they understand that. And they should be getting a lot more press, in my opinion, because they understand these connections, and they'll articulate it if you ask them. But no one's asking them. Not enough people are asking them.
That is Sam Holloway. Maya Dukmasova is in the studio as well. We got Doris Davenport waiting to go on. She's taking copious notes. She's got a lot of ideas I'm sure she wants to espouse. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times Online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader Online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. Jora, V as in victory, SKY. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed. We are live from the Sun-Times. Maya has left the building. Maya has left the building, but Sam Holloway has been kind enough to stick around. And Doris Davenport has joined us, an old friend of mine, going back to the days when I was on the radio, a different position in my life, which we won't talk about. Right, D?
Yeah, you were fired.
Oh, yeah.
What?
I was going to be a little more subtle than that, but get out of here and don't come back. Anyway.
Take your bull's hat.
And leave. Anyway, Doris, welcome. This is the first time you actually were on here once before. Remember?
Actually, I was. Yes, I was.
Yes, you came. I was going to say this is the first time you've been here, but you were here once before.
No, I like being in the chair.
Yes, you like being in the chair. And Doris is a talk show host in her own right. She's a political strategist in her own right. And she follows politics very closely indeed. So I had two general themes for Doris that I instruct her to do her homework on.
Always homework.
Always homework when you come on the Ben Joravsky Show. Bye-bye Rahm and hello Biden. So we'll start with the bye-bye Rahm part first. I don't know if you heard. I don't know if you were in the room when Sam was reminiscing about his encounter with Rahm in 2011. So we won't review that one. But your general thoughts. We'll start with your general thoughts, Doris, on the departure of Rahm. I think it's how many? 2 weeks away? 3 weeks away? Something like that.
You mean not one day yet?
I guess I get your general drift. So your general thoughts.
It is. It's about 2 weeks away. And I would like to say that I am on the camp that says it's about time.
Mm-hmm.
It's about time. I don't think he's been a friend to the entire city. I do believe that when it comes, and I've read some of the reports out about his success and or failure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he was a man who came in with a vision for a particular segment of the community of Chicago, and he held true to that. He likes to use an excuse that things didn't start with him, but that he can't deny that he continued those things, like making sure that the black community continues to be at the bottom of the success ladder when it comes to economic development, when it comes to employment, when it comes to contract opportunities, when it comes to education. I've heard him say just before he announced that he was going to leave, he was doing an interview with someone, and he made a comment that education is his top priority, and that the one thing that he did that he was so proud of was the school, quote unquote, consolidations. And I heard that, and I was really appalled. I could not believe that this man could rate his action of closing 50 schools within a 24-hour period without any kind of conversations with the families that are going to be impacted, all the teachers, the administrators, the employees in all those schools, putting all the kids in harm's way. We think about the mental illness. I mean, he also consolidated all the mental health clinics. He uses that word consolidation, but we have a huge mental health problem because of that action. And I look at the billions of dollars that he's put into developments while the west side and the south side of Chicago continue to be underserved. I look at how he has pushed the Lincoln Yards and the Sterling Bay projects, and all that money that we gave in incentives, he authorized it, but it's our money, that he gave to these projects. Imagine what could be done on the west side of Chicago. If the west side of Chicago had that kind of money for infrastructure, we could bring back manufacturing. And what would that do for unemployment in the black community?
And when I listen to you talk, I have to point out that he was supported in many of these endeavors by black aldermen.
Yes, he was. And you know, it's interesting because Rod Sawyer, a friend of mine who I like very much, was one of his strongest supporters.
Alderman Rod Sawyer of the 6th Ward. Go ahead.
Yes, and he narrowly won his re-election bid. He was forced into a runoff, and he was very upset about that. I think he ended up being in a runoff by 3 votes. But he did come through. And I really believe that Rod Sawyer, coming from the political family that he comes from, with all the experience that he has, I believe that a Rod Sawyer is going to be a very different alderman under Lori Lightfoot than he was under Rahm Emanuel.
Explain that.
Well, Rahm Emanuel has a very unique way of making people do what he wants you to do. And that bids well when you are an appointed official, like being chief of staff for the President of the United States of America. You must remember that when how Emanuel got his start was in opposition research. He was the guy who sent people out to pull your garbage out of the trash can at your house to find out what you didn't want anybody to know. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's anything about Rod Sawyer that he wouldn't want anybody to know, but he has a unique way of twisting people's arms. And so, however, whatever he uses to twist the arms to create a rubber stamp council, it might sound like the type of thing you want to hear on the television show Scandal, but just remember that the television show Scandal is based on real life Washington, D.C. political living.
And one of the things that Rahm was very determined about was, when you talked about arm twisting, that he wanted a big vote for any initiative he put forth. So it wasn't enough to win 26 to 24.
Right.
He needed to win 45 to 5, let's say, or 48 to 2. I'm doing math out of 50 aldermen. I'm really showing my
Did you bring your calculator? 'Cause I didn't bring mine.
unbelievable math skills by Ben Joravsky. But okay, he needed a big margin. It wasn't enough just to eke out a victory. And so arms got twisted. And so people couldn't even vote even if they wanted to. And I'm not saying any of them wanted to. All right. So
but you're right about that, because see, one thing Madigan, this is the distinction between a Madigan and an Emanuel. Madigan will say, okay, I understand you've got to take care of your politics in your area. So I'm going to let you vote the way you need to vote with your constituents when you need to, but you better not let my bill fail when I need you.
Right.
Rahm, that's not even an option.
All right. So do you think... there's an obsession in this town. I have to say this. There's an obsession in this town with consensus. And so we're doing the right thing at all times. And so, like, the more people vote for something, the more it's like we're doing the right thing.
Right.
Even if we're doing the wrong thing. I don't know how anybody could justify closing mental health clinics. By the way, there was an article in the Chicago Sun-Times, maybe it was the Tribune, I can't remember where. Don't quote me on which paper it was in, saying that Lori Lightfoot should not make the mistake of opening up more mental health clinics in neighborhoods because, and this is a mental health caregiver, the idea being that they're old-fashioned, antiquated, that's the word I'm looking for, ways of dealing with very complex problems. And so you shouldn't segregate and separate mental health patients from other patients. It was like a justification. But I'm like, okay, all right, if you have a more sophisticated approach to dealing with mental health issues, that's one thing. But don't allow yourself to be used to like put a nice spin on cutting mental health services.
Cutting mental health services. And that's the kind of thing that Rahm will do. But and I know we're focusing on Rahm, but I do want to say this one thing about our new mayor-elect, who's going to be sworn into office in just about 2 weeks now, if that long. But I don't think she's going to fall into that trap. Now,
which trap?
With Rahm Emanuel kind of, steamrolling what he wants to do without listening, without really understanding what the ramifications are, even if people come to her with what sounds like it's a good idea, I believe that she is the type of person that will listen to all sides in order to make the best decision. I don't think she's going to shy away from making tough decisions when she has to, but she appears to be the kind of person that has a heart, which I feel was absolutely lacking in this current administration.
All right, so do you think she's going to be the type of person who could live with a 26 to 24 victory as opposed to a 47 to 3 victory?
Look at how she won. Yes, I do.
Well, she won with 75% of the vote.
Well, no, but I mean initially. Initially, before.
Oh, I'm talking. Right, you're right. Where she eked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words, she would be more Madigan-esque in your opinion?
I think she'd be more Madigan-esque. I mean, look at her now. She's doing a listening tour. I've kept my ear close to the grapevine on her community visits. And almost to the community, the leaders, so far, the jury is that they believe that if she willfully and intentionally decides that she's going to do the things that she's talking about, she will have a lot of support. So it's really going to be based on her. And I think that people will support her tough decisions when she has to, if she proves that she's going to be fair and equitable.
Doris Davenport is my guest. Sam Holloway is sticking around, very patiently listening and absorbing.
I'm learning.
And I think we'll take a break. We come back. We talked about saying bye-bye to Rahm. We'll say hello to Joe Biden. Get your thoughts on Joe Biden, who right now is #1 in the polls to be the Democratic nominee nominee to president and to run against Donald Trump, and also ask your opinion about this editorial cartoon that I saw in the Tribune. I'd like to get both of your opinions about this editorial cartoon that I saw in the Tribune. So we'll have all that on the agenda when we come back.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. Music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
All right, Will, to that.
He says that so cool.
He does it. He's good, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
That silky smooth music means we're coming down the final stretch here, but we're not done yet. Sam Holloway's still in the studio. Doris Davenport's still in the studio. That's Sam Holloway playing the piano, by the way.
No.
Man, is he good. All right.
Oh, Sam,
Wait,
I didn't know.
by the way, Doris, Sam sings.
I'm not going to sing here.
Come on, please.
I have no accompaniment. I'm the weakest link in my group.
You don't have an accompaniment?
Yeah. Come on, Doris. All right, but just briefly tell folks you took singing lessons.
Yeah, I did.
And you just a concert. You just did a concert.
Yeah, and
okay.
I'll send you a copy of the original song we wrote. You'll like it because it's loosely based on the Jussie Smollett case.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness, I'd love a copy of that,
Ooh,
too.
I'd love to get I haven't talked to you about Jussie Smollett. I just wrote that down. Thank you for mentioning it. But the song that you actually did, a Bill Withers song, I thought.
Yeah, Lovely Day.
Lovely Day. You're not going to share a little, but come on.
It feels bad because
that song is dying
I don't have
for
my
acoustic.
band. I know.
Just one line.
I had my band with me. I had.
You can't
like
sing.
Three lovely days in C class.
It's a lovely day here on the Ben Joravsky Show. Find us on Facebook at Benny J Show, at Benny J Show on Twitter as well. I'm trying to bail you out here, Sam. I'm trying to hope they change the subject. You don't have to sing. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the live stream chat. Big thank you to everybody who joined us on the live stream chat. Feel free to join us tomorrow if you'd like and weigh in with your thoughts on the show. Benny J Show, at Benny J Show.
All right, very good. So that was a way of getting you off the hook.
I appreciate it.
And he has your back there. All right. So Joe Biden, Doris Davenport, your thoughts on Joe Biden? You want to play? Do we have the tape of that? Joe Biden.
Which one you want? We got two of them.
Which one do I want? The one where Joe Biden.
I got them in Pennsylvania, both of them. I'll just play it.
I believe that Pittsburgh and my native town of Scranton and my hometown of Wilmington and Claymont, they represent the cities and towns that make up hardworking middle-class Americans who are the backbone of this nation. That's not hyperbole. The backbone of this nation. I also came here because, quite frankly, folks, if I'm going to be able to beat Donald Trump in 2020, it's going to happen here. It's going to happen here. There are three basic reasons why I'm running for president of the United States. The first is to restore the soul of the nation, and the second is to rebuild the backbone of this nation. And the third is to unify this nation. We always do better when we act as one America. Today I want to speak about the second of these three, and that's rebuilding the backbone of America. And that is that we have time, all my time in public life from since I've gotten involved, I've been referred to as middle-class Joe. It's not always meant as a compliment. It's usually that I'm not sophisticated. That's why I'm middle-class Joe. But the fact of the matter is, I'm awfully sophisticated about why, how, and who built this country. Let me say this simply and clearly, and I mean this. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. It was built by you. It was built by the great American middle class.
Boy, Sam is into that.
Yeah, no, Sam's not a fan of Joe Biden. Thank you very much, Dennis. All right, we've heard Sam on Joe Biden. I've heard Maya on Joe Biden. He right now is #1 in the polls. I know it's early, and polls can be, proven wrong, and lots can happen between now and et cetera, and when the first primary is held or the first caucus. But you heard that speech there, Doris. How does Joe Biden strike you?
I love Joe Biden. I think that I understand people want change. People want something different. People want a younger version of this and a younger version of that. When Joe Biden jumped in the race, and I have not decided who I'm going to support yet, but when Joe Biden jumped in the race and made his decision final, I said, now, he just represents stability. And I want change, but I also want, and I also want stability. I was scrolling through my phone feverishly just now, and I'm, this angers people every time a woman stands up and supports Joe Biden now, because the trolls are out there just listening for it. Well, I'm putting myself on the line now. I was looking for a picture to show you of Joe Biden holding me by the shoulders, where he leans in, his head is low, and he's looking in my eyes, and I'm looking in his eyes, and we're having a conversation. Jill is right there. You can see her in the picture.
Joe Biden, his wife.
His wife. And that is who Joe Biden is. Now, I'm a person, I have my own Me Too stories to tell, so I am not a person who will, in any way denigrate a woman who's got a story to tell. But the stories about him touching inappropriately and holding your hand too long, that is Joe Biden. And I know I have never, a woman knows the difference between a creepy kind of a feeling from a guy who's trying to be sexual with you versus somebody who is being affectionate with you. And I have experienced, I'm sure Joe Biden has smelled my hair. And so what? I'm just saying, he's a fatherly, Sam. He is a fatherly kind of.
Wait, Doris, I didn't know you had met him. How did you know?
I have met him a couple of times when I worked on Barack Obama's campaign. I was on the finance committee for Barack Obama's campaign when he ran the first time, and so I've met him a couple of times.
And so, in other words, you're saying you don't take. You're not particularly offended by the stories that have emerged.
No,
this is
I'm
a whole
not at all offended.
Yeah.
I'm not at all offended.
About the invasion of space issues that he has.
I'm not at all offended because there are many people that we know who are those kinds of people that like close proximity. So you step back, and I get it. If it's a man versus a man and a woman talking, some women feel intimidated. I have felt intimidated by men, but never by Joe Biden, is my point. When it comes to the issues, though, I do believe that I know about all the issues that Joe Biden fought for, the Anita Hill stories and the things that he did in his past. But just like Barack Obama evolved on his beliefs about homosexuality, and other leaders have evolved on other issues, so has Joe Biden. I think that when he talks about rebuilding and reunifying and restoring what we have, we need somebody that is strong and that will fight toe-to-toe with Trump. Now, is Joe Biden the one to do that above all the other candidates? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I'm glad he's in the race. I do wish him very, very well. And I'm not surprised that he's at the top of the pack.
And to a large degree, we had this long conversation with Maya earlier in the show. We were talking about how voters don't always zoom in on issues or a candidate's position papers, that there's some kind of connection that successful candidates make with voters, and that enables them to get elected, often despite their position papers or lack thereof. So when you hear Joe Biden make that address and make that appeal, do you feel that kind of connection?
Yes, I do. I feel cared for. I feel safe. I feel like he is authentic. I feel like he will do the things that he says he's going to do. I feel like he is absolutely disgusted with what is going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I do believe that he feels that that our country has been assaulted, and that we are all under this. You know, I have a Bible that has a little ebb and flow of where the moral compass is of our world, and I think that if we'd had that kind of mapping going on with our presidencies, we would be at an all-time low right now.
Yeah, and just in terms of the conduct of the president of the United States.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take issue with that because I'm currently reading a book about the illegal slave trade in Cuba, and how our nation's wealth was originally built off of not just slave labor and genocide of the Native Americans, but after independence, we were directly involved in smuggling slaves from the west coast of Africa to Cuba, and we continued that triangle of trade, even though we declared it illegal. Long story short, all the presidents who were in office while this was going on knew exactly what was going on. They increased the size of the U.S. Navy to protect it from the British. We're talking about a country where the earliest presidents were slaveholders. And again, George, the first president, I could show you, we don't have time now, but I could show you a letter he wrote to the commander of his military forces instructing him to begin a genocidal campaign against Native Americans in the West of what the country was at the time. So to suggest that Donald Trump is a departure from presidents past, I mean, I wasn't old enough to be aware of what was going on in the Vietnam War. That happened in my lifetime. And not long before I was born, the Korean War, another horrible act that this country committed by presidents. So I'm not convinced that Joe Biden, based on the wars that he's approved of and the policies that he helped to author, which have put so many people behind the 8 ball financially and in prison, because he was an architect of both the crime bill and our current drug policy. He was a vociferous supporter of these things. So maybe he's evolved. I haven't seen that. I just heard a snippet of a speech which sounded very vague to me, even if it was sincere. The cartoon you showed us.
Well, we'll get into that. But Doris, what's your thoughts when you hear Sam say?
Yeah, well, we can't ignore our history, but I would say that at that time, the majority of the country supported those actions of the president. What makes this president so egregious to me, his actions, is because we have such large portions of our country now who agree with everything that's probably in that book, and yet he's still trying to take us back to the very places that you're reading about.
Right, and I have you touched on something earlier about, and I'm going to just use the term because this is the term I thought of, whatever it was you were talking about, bipartisanship. And to me, the most terrifying and horrifying things that this country does are the things that the Democrats and Republicans agree on. And the Iraq War was one. Currently, this was what I was doing before I came here. I was on Twitter watching all the journalists I follow and what have you follow this coup that's being attempted in Venezuela right now.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Trump administration's authoring it. But I'm not hearing any pushback at all from any leading Democrats. As a matter of fact, the assault that we sort of helped conduct on Syria, that was a bipartisan affair. So as far as I'm concerned, and we've talked about this before, Ben, not on your show, but to me it seems like the biggest problem with Trump is his breaches of etiquette, not so much his policies, but his breaches of etiquette. He's not polite. He's an open racist. He says the quiet things out loud.
You think his policies about the immigrants are okay? You think his policies about Muslims being banned to travel are okay?
No, I'm not saying they're okay. I'm saying they're not departures from what was happening before.
All the good work and new policies that were put into make housing more affordable, pushing that back for another 2 or 3 years, so it doesn't have to be dealt with until the next generation gets in.
The Obama administration.
That's a bit more than etiquette.
Right. Yeah. The Obama administration deported more people and locked up more people than any presidency before it. What Trump has done What Trump has done
But he
is
never
not a
separated
departure.
families.
Yes, he did. There are families.
No, that was not part of the
these
Obama
immigration
policy
prisons
to
that Trump
separate
is using.
families.
A lot of those were built and activated under Obama.
Well, we'd have to do our research and really go to, we can talk about that, because everything that I have read is that the Obama policy did not include separating families and putting people in cages.
And openly celebrating it. See, here's
And
where I
drugging
But that's
the
what I'm talking
children
about.
Yeah.
to
Etiquette.
keep
Well,
That's
them
what I'm saying.
in
yeah, but I
line.
think
the
it- I think-
policies have not changed that substantially. They've just been dialed up, and they're openly celebrating it. Yes, but we're not talking about a radical departure.
I would say this. I would say this. I would say that when it specifically with immigration, that the Obama administration did not know how to deal with this very difficult, thorny issue of people coming in across the border and just without going through the proper channels that had been set up for the control of immigration. Now, personally, my personal opinion, I tend to be a little more on the libertarian side of these things than most conventional politicians. That's why I'm not elected to anything. But there's a big difference between not knowing what to do about a situation and then openly manipulating it so you inflame people, you turn people against each other, you play blacks against whites and blacks against Hispanics, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen this happen since Donald Trump was announced he was running in 2015, and I think it's a very serious and dangerous thing that he's doing, the language he uses. So I think when you use the word etiquette, you're sort of minimizing the destructiveness of what Donald Trump has done,
Anybody
the
deserves
coarseness.
the etiquette, it's Obama, not Trump.
What's that?
If anybody deserved that label of etiquette, having it be, he tried to do the right thing, and he always had a moral compass about those things that he was doing. He didn't want to hurt families. He didn't deliberately want to try to create these policies that force people to do what he wanted them to do. He tried to have a comprehensive system.
You're talking about Barack Obama.
yeah.
He just make sure that.
I don't want to try to see inside Obama's heart, but what I'm getting at is but Obama was a very smart man. And he surrounded himself with presumably very smart people. To say that he did not know what to do about the immigration problem, maybe not, but I doubt it. I think the solutions to the immigration problem, such as we want to call it a problem, were things that he was never going to touch, because the problem.
What are the solutions that you think
the problem
would work?
of our immigration is the border itself. The border exists not to stop the flow of capital, but to stop the flow of people. So when capital is moved in such a way to make people desperate, to exploit people, back and forth it goes over the border in these imaginary realms, electronic realms.
Yeah, I know what you're
But the people are forced to stay.
It's not, I wouldn't say that it's capital, although I get your point, but I absolutely, it still goes back to policy. I mean, we can't ignore what NAFTA did, right?
Signed by Bill Clinton.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why if he was running, I would not be supporting him. But NAFTA really put a monkey wrench in so much. NAFTA, in my opinion, was one of that and the drug policies are the nails in the coffin for blacks when it came to unemployment and economic development.
Yeah, we were, it's funny, I was just thinking about this because I don't know if, well, you guys obviously know this. John Singleton died at age 51 years old, very young, and he was the director of Boys in the Hood. And Boys in the Hood was one of the first times that I was ever exposed to the notion, there's a scene in Boys in the Hood, I think it's Lawrence Fishburne, don't quote me on that one, is talking about how the influx of drugs is into the black community in Los Angeles is actually controlled by the government. I remember that scene.
Yeah,
where
I do. And I believe it because, like you said, Sam, we have so many smart people in this country and in leadership all around the United States of America. And if we wanted to eradicate the drug problem and all of the many implications around the drug problem, we would do it in a heartbeat. But we don't want to because it's part of our capital system. And the people who are managing that system and benefiting, oh my goodness, are part of the 1%.
All right. Now, before I let you get out of here, you said you wanted to talk about marijuana. You had a different take on it, I think, than I do, Doris Davenport. The libertarian in me, legalize it right now. We can worry about the details later. But that's the libertarian in me, which who never get elected or anything. The same guy who says, you know what, I don't Let's just open those borders up. All right, libertarian in me. Sam's laughing, but there's that little streak of libertarianism in me. I just saw in the paper today that Kelly Cassidy, who comes on the show frequently, good friend of the show, they're putting the final touches on. I think it's a 300-page, I want to say.
400 pages.
Yeah, but there's an enormous bill, which,
it
of
equals
course.
the Mueller report.
Yeah, I hope it's written a little better. And a 300 to 400-page bill dealing with the legalization of marijuana. I cannot believe this is happening in my lifetime. 10 years ago, I definitely didn't foresee this. You have some basic concerns about this? Talk about that.
Yeah, I do. I'm really, really nervous and scared about legalizing marijuana. I think that the kids and the young people that are going to be most negatively impacted by this are the black and brown kids. The science shows that over time, your short-term and long-term memory are impacted by the use of marijuana. I am very nervous about knowing that I'm going to be driving every day on the highways and the byways, and there will be people driving alongside as high as a kite. And how is that going to be regulated? What does that mean for my insurance? What does it mean for their insurance? And I think one of the other big issues is that we're pushing this only to generate revenue. That is the reason. I understand people say it's about criminal justice reform. I don't see that, because you have these people who have the licenses, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to make a lot of money on those licenses. But when you look at what I would like Kelly Cassidy to come forward in public and talk about is, what are the assurances that she's putting in that bill to ensure that the workers that are going to be employed by the people that have licenses are going to be able to have unions for themselves, that they're going to be able to get paid fair wages, that they're going to be able to live in conditions that are going to be, where they can grow a family, and that there's going to be parity.
Yeah,
I'm nervous about all that.
I got to tell you, and I'm going to bring you back with Kelly Cassidy. I would love to see the debate between you and Kelly Cassidy on this particular.
Can I just want to add? I want to see the people who've been locked up for possession and for dealing let out right away. And not only that, but they give them first crack at the licenses, because they've had much of their life stolen.
Yeah.
Give them the chance to make money off of something they were wrecked over.
And absolutely, the war on drugs. And it goes again. I'm going to give a shout out to John Singleton, Boys in the Hood, 1991. And he was already pointing this out.
Yes,
the war on drugs was having a direct impact in the neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles that he was chronicling with that early movie. So yeah, I think it's high time, no pun intended. I guess the pun was intended, that we end this.
I see what you did there.
It's
a weed joke.
Yeah, it's a weed joke. I cannot talk about reefer, Doris Davenport, without making a joke about it.
We'll allow it.
All right, thank you very much. That is Sam Holloway. Doris Davenport is also in the studio. I want to thank both of you for coming in and being so patient with each other and sharing the mic. If you don't see eye to eye on absolutely everything.
That would be really
Oh, nice. Guest hug.
So a lot of love in this studio right now. And by chance, I can't believe it, the first time Sam was on my show, it wasn't even my show. Wasn't I hosting? Was it Dick Kay? Was it Dick? I can't remember who I was guesting.
Yeah, I know you were filling in.
Yeah, I was filling for someone. The great, the legendary Del Marie Cobb was on.
Yes.
I swear I did not do that. But listening to you guys debate, I was like having a flashback. Del Marie Cobb telling Sam how wrong he was about Hillary Clinton. Okay, so you're trying to tell him how wrong he is about Joe Biden. I'm like, oh my God! I swear, Sam, it's not intentional. I don't.
Well,
you feel like you set up?
That looks, if that, yeah.
I know. I swear.
The same way.
What's that?
Let's hope it doesn't end up the
yes.
same way.
Let's hope
4
that,
years of Trump.
Yes. Right. There we go. I think we'll all agree on that one. All right. Sam Holloway, Doris Davenport, Maya Dukmasova. Who else has been in the studio? Miles, our office editor, doing a great job as always. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend behind the board, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. The ladies all love him for his body and mind. Spinning that.
No one says that.
Okay.
No women say that.
Dr. D, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Thanks.
Hey, live streamers, if you missed any part of today's program, do not worry. It'll be available for download
I'd say give me till 4 o'clock, all right? I'll have it up for download. You can listen to whatever part of the program you missed. Hey, downloaders, you know we live stream this show, right? Yeah, we do. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Join us. It's a fantastic time. This guy, Steven, just like puts in millions of comments. They're great comments, by the way, Steven. Big fan of Sammy is. Head over to the live chat and join us live. It's a fantastic time. Oh, at Benny J Show on Twitter, at Benny J Show on Facebook. Find us. We'll talk to you soon.